Now, Michelle, you spent a lot of time in South Carolina, but now you're back in the New York, New Jersey area. Um, Tell us a little bit about how your job is going to affect the next level of storytelling.
Yeah, that's a really good question. A lot, before this, I actually never, but before my job as a news producer, I never was writing. I could always look at a script and just say, well, that's not quite right, or that just doesn't hit well, or something, but I wouldn't know why.
Mm.
And I think that being a news producer actually helps my storytelling a lot, and it actually helps me as a cinematographer. It helps me, of course, a film producer. It helps me in every aspect of my filmmaking. And I'm actually writing a script based off of an experience I had in South Carolina, because in South Carolina, I also worked in news, but just a different aspect of it. Was a news photographer, and I was kind of behind the scenes doing camera and things like that. And so I'm writing a script based off of an experience for that. So working in news with how crazy everything is in the world, there's definitely a lot of inspiration that comes from it. Um, and it it's definitely it's helped me a lot in my filmmaking.
Now, I start out in college news, and
Oh
I'm
yeah.
all about being concise. So, I don't know if it started there or what, but in news, you have to tell a story in a very short amount of time. Um, do you find that you've grown in that direction?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, especially since the farmhand ended up, it was a 28-page script. It ended up being 42 minutes long. Yeah, I didn't write it. My mom wrote it. It was a mother-daughter type film. Um, we had four mother-daughter duos on set for the farmhand, so it was definitely a collective effort there. But I feel like with that story, we could have either extended it or we could have shortened it even just a little bit more, because we do want to eventually turn it into a full feature one day. And just I've learned so much in my job as a news producer, where just like you said, just being able to pick out what's important for a story, and just knowing you only have 20, 25, sometimes 30 seconds for a lot of these stories. And what's the most important thing about a story, what drives the story, what are people interested in. And I can definitely use that knowledge and apply it to filmmaking. It's funny, you wouldn't think that the worlds are connected at all, but they definitely help each other. Like even for the news side of things, being a filmmaker has helped my writing in news. Just because you think it's super cut and dry, and while a lot of stories are factual, there are certain ways that you can kind of make it a little bit more creative, and kind of fulfill that part of what I love about news and what I love about filmmaking. Just kind of combine those worlds.
Right, and it's all storytelling. So
Yes.
at the end of the day, they can inform each other. It's just a different method.
Yes, exactly. That's the perfect way to put it.
Now, you had written the farmhand, or I'm sorry, your mother had written the farmhand, and you two co-directed it.
Yes.
How did that dynamic work?
Yeah, yeah, it's so funny because the way that the farm even started was my mom had dreamt it. So, she had a dream, and she was telling me, about these characters, and the original ending was actually a lot darker than the way it actually ended. I won't give any spoilers, but it was a lot darker at first. And so when she was telling me about it, I told her she has to write it down, because even if we don't end up filming it, because it was a period piece, I was like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. I am not going near it. I am not filming it. We have no budget. We are just independent filmmakers. It's just self-funded. We're just not doing a period piece. It's too much money. It's too ridiculous. And so I was like, but just write it. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. It's such a great story. You got to write it down. And so she did, and I can't believe we ended up filming it, but I'm so glad we did. Um, and so just the dynamic on set was super interesting, because, like I said, we did have four mother-daughter duos on set. So there was, like the whole cast and crew definitely felt like a family, and there was literal family on set, but it kind of brought everyone together, and having that dynamic with my mom, I'm very, very close with her. It just took our relationship to a whole new level, because it was one of those things where, you're my mom, and you just mean so much to me. But then we became work partners, and I can't believe I was able to call her a writer and a director, and being able to do that alongside her was just an experience I want to do over and over again. It's something I never I can't explain how amazing that was, just because my mom, this was the first thing she's ever written. It's the first time she's ever directed anything. She never went to film school. She had no knowledge about anything before this. And so we were just kind of feeding off of each other. And it was interesting to see what she focused on and what she thought was really important, as someone who kind of wasn't in the industry, I guess, beforehand. Just because, when we were directing, she was focusing a lot on emotion, and then I was focusing more on the blocking of the scene. So she really drove, because she wrote it, she really knew how the characters should be feeling, but the actors really took it, and they made it something incredible. But she was able to really guide them towards something deeper, as if than if I were to do it, just because I didn't write it, I didn't dream it, I didn't literally feel it like she did in her dream. So she did an amazing job, and it was an amazing experience, honestly.
Yeah, I was going to ask about like the division of responsibilities, and you answered that. So it's funny because I'll bounce ideas off my wife, who's very we watch TV and film a lot.
Yeah.
We're consumers, but she doesn't go into the creative end so much. So I'll bounce an idea off her, and she'll be like, eh.
Yeah.
So I'll either have to try to explain it better, or maybe something isn't working. So it's nice to have that outside perspective.
Yeah.
But even so, film I had done, this film had spanned 10 years, pretty much on and off, because I had shot something, didn't get to finish it, actors moved away, all this stuff, came back, and I kind of bookended and wrapped it up in almost like a flashback. So I was able to make films more like the movies that I had seen when I didn't know as much about filmmaking. And now that I'm a little more technically knowledgeable and story and theory and shot compositionally minded, I feel like I'm almost stuck in that, and I need to bridge that gap somehow.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that definitely, it's one of those things, you hit it on the head, where I was definitely stuck in my mindset in how things should look, or if I saw something very specifically, and just having that outside perspective of someone who is a consumer, like my mom. She loves movies, she loves reading, she has inspiration from other places than I do. So just being able to collaborate with someone who doesn't have just a set mindset was really, really valuable, and I think it made the film a lot better, especially since when I was filming it, I had this very specific idea of wanting to use a lot less depth of field in everything that I was doing, because I kind of wanted the background to be more like its own character. And I really wanted the background and the farm to shine. And that idea came out of a collaboration with my mom. So it was really special.
And I think that's part of the reason why it looks so professional. A lot of the films, or a lot of independent filmmakers, have gone to lower light, which means open apertures.
Yeah.
And we've just become that look of I'm in focus, everything else doesn't matter. But your film definitely strayed from that in the best way possible, in that you're like, hey, this is a world out here for you to look at. This is interesting, this is important, and I'm not trying to hide anything. It was, I thought, to me, if you look at a lot of films, a lot of actual professionally shot films, from say even just the 2000s, maybe even before, a lot of stuff was in focus.
Yeah.
a lot of that production design was like, hey, look at this, look at this. So I feel like with this new school of thought, with shooting wide open or 2.8, something close to it, um, I think there is room to play,
Yeah.
and you should if it makes sense for your story. So it's all dictated by story.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. That was beautifully put. Yeah. That was definitely the driving factor for me. Just because there are certain scenes, especially towards the end of the film, in like the final, not the final battle, but the one, the situation leading up to the final battle, I did wanted to add a little bit of depth of field, to some of the shots, just for character feeling, and
Sure.
for it to be, of course, when you have more depth of field and you shoot wider open, it kind of makes it feel like a little jerkier, I guess, when I'm going handheld.
Mm.
So I definitely wanted it to seem hectic, I guess,
Yeah.
in a lot of those shots that had that stronger depth of field. Those were the only times when I went for anything higher than a 35 millimeter, was when things were actually a little bit more hectic in the film. Just because I really wanted it to feel a little bit more jarring when the camera was moving handheld.
Right. And
Yeah.
again, that's just another example. Use it for what's right. It does. Your whole
Yeah.
film doesn't have to be exactly the same if you don't want it to be. If there's a point where you say, "What's a way technically that I can call attention to this detail or this emotion, how this character is feeling? Maybe he's not in his right mind, or he's just whatever it may be." Um, you have the tools at your disposal
Yeah.
to make a creative decision, and that's great.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.